Welcome back to Apply Now, your go-to podcast for creator economy career advice and hiring insights. Today's guest is Jenny Quigley-Jones, founder and CEO of Digital Voices. Jenny, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, James. Really excited. We haven't been
Yeah,
on a
so
podcast
excited
together
we get a
before.
chance to catch up.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
I thought we'd start off by chatting a little bit about your early career. How did you initially find your way into the creator economy?
Completely accidentally. I actually started my career specializing in Syrian refugee integration and working in in camps in Lebanon, Jordan, and while I was doing my master's in Middle Eastern studies. And then I ended up working for Oxfam on a quite tech-forward project. And I thought I was going to stay in academia or the development world forever. But I kind of hit a learning ceiling. And I thought, actually, my career will go really slowly if I stay in this space. And also there's this debate about whether you're really adding value as someone who I spoke okay Arabic, but I'm not from the region. I actually thought a lot of the work I was doing could be done better by someone from the region. And it would be better to also give them that opportunity. So I had this ethical moment where I was concerned, and then learning is the number one driver for me in my career. So during this existential moment, I read an article in The Economist that said, if you want your career to grow quickly, there are two routes you should take. One, if you were the first route, if you were a good student at college, you're very well-rounded, you're on sports teams, you're you've always been good at working smarter, not harder. You're kind of average good. You should go to management consultancy. The second route is if you're super quirky and you might have got high grades because you hyperfixate on a problem, or you throw yourself into really weird hobbies. That route too, you should go and work in tech if you want your career to grow fast. And I was like, oh, quirky, that sounds like me. So I completely switched where I was. I applied for jobs in tech. So I applied for jobs at Amazon and Google and Meta. And I got one of the jobs at YouTube in the UK. So I knew nothing about the creator economy beforehand. I knew about YouTube in the Middle East because that was my specialism.
Sure.
I'd worked on documenting child torture on YouTube, how activists had used it to document child torture. I'd looked at how Saudi women driving was transformed because a woman posted a YouTube video of herself driving. So I loved the idea that I could help that region speak for itself on the platform. But my Arabic wasn't fluent in multiple dialects, which was what Google wanted. So they were like, actually, would you consider a UK role? And I knew nothing about YouTube in the UK. I just lived in America for 2 years. I specialize in the Middle East. So I said, yeah, okay, I'll do the interview. And I think influencer marketing really wants to hire smart people who think differently, because influencer marketing has to reflect the plethora of communities that we all engage with. It has to reflect the diversity of society. So having a weird brain is such a superpower. Watching something that other people might not think about, again, is a superpower. So I accepted the job and worked at YouTube for 2 years as a strategic partner manager, which meant I had to help YouTube creators grow on the platform. Because when they make more money from ads, so does YouTube. And then after 2 years, again, I felt like I'd plateaued in terms of learning. And I left the company and had £500 put £500, so $700 into a business bank account. And I had £10,000 in savings, which now I look back at that and I'm like, that was no money. At that point, I was like, yeah, this is enough money to live. I think I was actually insane. And I started Digital Voices, the company, from scratch with £500 and started consulting on teaching people to grow on YouTube, teaching brands to grow on YouTube, teaching brands how to do influencer marketing. And for 9 months, I consulted and freelanced.
What was the inspiration? Did you know you always wanted to be an entrepreneur, or just felt called to do consulting for a little bit? Yeah.
No, not at all. There was a big gap. There was definitely a gap in the industry where no one at that point knew how to do YouTube partnerships with brands. So brands would often be given to our team, and our job was nothing to do. None of our KPIs were linked to helping a brand work with an influencer. So brands would get given to our team because we knew the creators really well. And it was in no one's interest to help them. So that I knew there was a gap for that kind of matchmaking, the creative strategy, the measurement piece. But no, I didn't ever plan on being an entrepreneur. And now I look back on it and I can't imagine anything else.
Yeah,
But,
right.
yeah.
I had a similar story. I didn't expect it, but once you're in it, right, it's hard to go back.
Yeah, and it's also really interesting if you look at like gender and race. There aren't that many great entrepreneurial role models. Like, it's changing now, but who show you what you can achieve. And I think so to me, like, my parents were a lawyer and an accountant. Like, my mum even said to me after I'd started Digital Voices, I was like 2 years in, and she was like, Jenny, it's not too late to train to be a lawyer. Like, I had no examples of being a female entrepreneur. I had no examples of entrepreneurship in my family. So I think you kind of only dream what you can see.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if you find this, it's falling into entrepreneurship. It's like, oh, what if I actually trusted myself to make these decisions?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, like, I think the agency model and the way of working with clients is flawed. Okay, so I have another idea, but what would happen if I actually did that idea?
Mm.
Then as the company scaled, now it's like 7 years later, it's like, what would happen if you put money into building that tech that you think is missing in the industry? And it's like, wow, that takes so much belief in yourself. But like, you gradually have to get there through entrepreneurship, through like learning to place a bet and then it doesn't fuck up. Sorry, I don't know if you swear on this.
That's totally fine.
If you place a bet and then it goes well, you trust
Yep.
yourself more it compounds to place more bets and to do better. So that's kind of where I think the confidence of entrepreneurship comes from, and kind of the slight addiction to it once you've started.
Amazing. It is an adrenaline rush, right? There's nothing like it. So you do get hooked. What was the hardest part about being a first-time founder?
There are a few things. I mean, structurally, there are a few things like, so you have to like deprioritize paying yourself. Like, my accountant after the first year of the business took me aside and was like, Jenny, I don't know how you've survived. You've paid yourself 10 grand and you've taken off £8,000 in subsistence expenses, like going to meetings. He was like, I don't know how you've survived in London on that little money. Because to me, as soon as I decided I wanted to hire people, paying their salaries every month has to come first. Second is like if you have to pay for an office or anything else. And then third is you. So I would say that the like structural hard parts are like making payroll, not operating from a place of scarcity in your brain, because you know how close you are to like the line. Even so even when you're working with brands, they often have like 60 or 90-day payment terms. So you're incurring costs and you're also trying to pay staff and trying to pay influencers to do the work. And they were like, well, this is why we don't work with small agencies. If you can't accept our payment terms, goodbye.
Yeah.
And those structurally are really hard things to plan for. And you have to like really be careful on cash flow. I think that's where most businesses go under.
Sure.
The actual hardest part psychologically, I don't know if you feel this, is the moments you have where you doubt yourself. It's the moments where you're like, have I made this up? Like entirely? Like, why did I decide this would work? Like, knowing how to price yourself, knowing how to like ask for the money you need. Like now I'm at the stage where the company's nearly 100 people. We have pricing models, we have processes, it's fine. But at those early days, as soon as self-doubt creeps in, you can just spiral. You can be like, oh, am I building something no one wants? Or why did I ever think this was a good idea?
And it's so easy to fall into that imposter syndrome, right? We all feel like maybe we don't deserve the success, or you're figuring everything out as you go along, and so you have those moments of doubt. So how do you push through them? How do you make sure that you are overcoming the doubt?
I think the issue with imposter syndrome is all the wrong people have it. And that's sometimes how I don't have heroes this is really weird. I don't have heroes I look up to. Like, my heroes in business are like Mohammed Yunus, who's like a Nobel Peace Prize winning entrepreneur who gives microloans in Bangladesh to women. That's like my hero. Actually, in this industry, this sounds really harsh. I don't have heroes. I have anti-heroes. And I think, God, if you don't push yourself, if you don't really go for that sale, if you don't occupy that space, if you don't post this on LinkedIn, if you don't whatever, the other people are going to win. And the other people in this industry, especially a few years ago, it was all, sounds mean, it was all straight white men who went to the right private schools in the UK.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Sure.
didn't go to private school. There's not that much, given how diverse the creator part of this industry is, the diversity at the top is really lacking. So the way I pushed through it was like, look, if you don't do it, you're giving it to someone else. And you deserve, like, for other people who might not see success in a way that looks like you deserve for them, you should try.
That's awesome. So now you can start to be that representation for the next generation of entrepreneurs, right? Much in the same way that you didn't necessarily have that when you were a kid.
Yeah, hopefully. And to be honest, they're probably going to put me to shame. Like, they are going to innovate in ways I can't even imagine. And that's so exciting. They're going to hold people accountable in ways I couldn't imagine. They're going to shape the way we hire. I'm really excited to see what comes next. If I'm a tiny part of it, amazing. But like, I think the Gen Zs we've hired are very bold in asking for what they want. And like, I'm really excited to see what comes next.
Let's talk more about that, right? What are the cultural differences between generations, right? Gen Z versus millennials,
Yeah. I think millennials were told things were going to change and we were very idealistic about it. And then I think we had to live through like the financial crash in 2008, COVID. Like, I think actually we then were still too people pleasing. Gen Z, to me, they are very strict on the cultures they want to be a part of, the norms they want to perpetuate. They want to be proud of their work. And they also know that, I think maybe because they haven't been through a huge financial crisis yet, they know that if they go on freelance, they can make enough money to survive, and they believe their skills have value. So I think to keep Gen Z really engaged, you have to give them a vision to believe in, because otherwise their vision is themselves. And if you're trying to compete with someone who is like knows how to choose themselves, God, you better be doing something great with your company. Because like otherwise, why would they prioritize like the team's growth over their own? I think like culture that's flexible, but culture that like celebrates a plethora of identities is really important. I've had Gen Z members of my team join my company because they were at companies before where the CEO had a specific view on pride and would like cancel pride celebrations. One of the people on my team had a CEO who put a flag outside the office that said "No woke." This is a no woke zone, like a literal flag. They were like, I really want to work somewhere where I feel like the values that I believe in are represented.
Sure.
Learning opportunities, like huge social opportunities, are really big, again, to make people come together.
Yep.
So I think those are definitely different attitudes that Gen Z has over millennials. And I'm so glad that they are less people-pleasy than we are.
Very good. So you've scaled your agency from just you in the early days, right, to almost 100 people now. What are the key things you look for when hiring?
Yeah, we've been doing a lot of thinking about this recently, because also as it scales so much and as it's other people making hiring decisions, not me, like people will start at the company and I have not met them. Like,
sure.
Yeah, I turn up at company events and sometimes I don't know my own team. Like, who people turned up at our holiday event in London and were like, oh, I must be in the wrong place. And then they realized it was our company. It was crazy. The two things I would say to hire for, two traits that like are non-negotiables, beyond like knowing your expertise area, because that's basic, are empathy and accountability. Those two, like if you have one, not the other, it still won't work. Accountability, because when you're a scaling company, you need people who will really own a project. If you give it to them, they won't just push it to someone else. They will solve that problem. And it's been really, really important to hire people who are problem solvers and give feedback on the team, because again, it makes everything that we do better. And then empathy, because especially in the influencer space, which is so human, you cannot, and like when you're working with clients, you cannot talk to people in a horrible way without negative ramifications. You like should not do it. You also like the core of this industry is like trying to work out how to fit people's different aims and objectives together. And if you don't do that with empathy, it will fail. And I also think empathy drives a more inclusive workplace, because you respect where someone's differences come from.
Yeah, definitely. How do you test for that? When you meet someone or you're interviewing somebody, how do you evaluate their empathy and their accountability?
So, and I know this is really divisive in recruiting, so I'd love your thoughts on it. We do a task for the accountability and like to see someone's skills. We give them like a template task. We tell them to spend like 2 hours max on it. So if you're an accounts person, we'll ask you to put together a pitch and give a presentation back to the client. And that's been really interesting because some people talk a really good game. And then when it comes to presenting the work, they either haven't done it, they haven't listened, or they're not actually good presenters. And I think it's very, very clear immediately if they're accountable. And then when you give them feedback on it, do they take that feedback on board and go, yeah, I could have changed it this way? Or do they really dig in and say, I believe I'm right?
Yeah, they get defensive, right?
Yeah. And I think that's really important. So like getting someone to do a substantive task to actually see how their brain works, that really encourages accountability. The empathy part often comes out through like situational questions. So like what is the question, like what is something that you love about yourself that you insist on in the next culture you want to be a part of for work? Like what is the next company? What does it have to have culturally as a minimum for you? And then you weed out if people have really thought about that or not. You can ask questions about micromanagement, but everyone says, oh, I don't like to micromanage. Like that, you don't really cut through it. The other question that's really good is, it's a strengths and weaknesses question, but a way of framing it so it doesn't sound like you're throwing your weaknesses out there. It's like, okay, having spoken to everyone, having read the job description, do you think there is anything that you would need to learn to succeed in this job, and how can we help you with those goals? Again, if they don't have empathy or accountability, they won't have a good answer to that question because they'll think they're the best. And if you think you are infallible, like you're not going to work in a scale up where the company changes every 18 months.
Yeah. So as the business grows, what advice do you have for people who are looking to get ahead in their career, want to get promoted, right? What's the secret to success in terms of making progress?
It's a really good question. It kind of goes back to the Gen Z point as well. I think Gen Z are very, very well aware of their skills and their value, but they are also often very impatient for growth. I think also because they come into the workplace during COVID where there was so much pressure chucked on businesses, so much money thrown into D2C, and we needed to grow really quickly. So people were used to getting promoted like every 6 months, every year. Whereas, I mean, when I was at Google, it would be exceptional if you were promoted in 18 months. Like 2 years was standard, and then as you get more senior, you get promoted more slowly. So I would say firstly, like, stop and take a beat. Think like, actually, is it really sustainable for me to be at a company that promotes me every year? And why am I asking for a promotion every year? Like, if the skills are that easy to demonstrate, it's that easy to grow, are you really learning? Like, why? So I would say firstly, set expectations and be like, do you want to be promoted more than once every 2 years? Also, like, are you giving the job you're in enough of an opportunity to grow your skills? So are you spending learning budgets? Are you taking time to get the benefits of the company? If they're giving you a learning budget, use it. How are the projects that you've run? Like, how are you demonstrating the value of them? Have you really gone and done like a real wash up on like, how could this project be better in future? How am I going to pitch it? How am I doing measurement? How am I showing an impact on the business? Like, actually take time and think about long-term projects, because long-term projects take time. So don't just rush into being like, I did one thing while I want to get promoted. Because that's like, did you learn from that experience at all? No. The other thing is, if you're applying for jobs all the time, you are spending the only extra time you have applying for other jobs rather than learning. Like, there are moments where, okay, like, give yourself a year in a new company to see if you like to learn, and then to see if you can have an impact, and then to do like actual learning beyond your core role. So I would say if you're trying to get promoted, like, my actual thought is, why? What do you want? How can you demonstrate you're ready for that? How have you got the most from the learning experience? Because I think people are often trying to just get promoted for the sake of a title or a pay rise. But it's like, is it ego driving you?
Sure.
Or is it your skills?
Right. Yeah. And are you ready for it? Because I find that as much as when you enter a new role and there's a steep learning curve, then you can learn a lot of things quickly. But the challenge is mastery comes when you get in doing something for a long time, right? And you're gradually refining and honing that skill over and over again. So if you really want to have longevity in a career or a company, sometimes it takes kind of getting through those plateau moments, because that's when you're really honing that skill.
Yeah, and I think you're entirely right on that. People in the first 6 months, when they do all the learning to get to the basics of the job they were hired for, they then think, great, like I could get promoted, I'm on the next level. And you're like, no, you've literally just done the mastery part. Like you now need to do the job.
Exactly. Yep.
And I mean, I think also like one of the things that's really surprised me in this industry recently is like how few people have like weekly one-to-ones with their managers, like bi-weekly one-to-ones. I spoke to someone who hadn't had a one-to-one with their manager in like 6 months.
That's
like,
crazy,
okay.
right? Like you need that feedback on both sides. Right? It's unacceptable for the manager to not be doing the one-on-one, but also as an employee, you should be raising your hand and saying, look, I need feedback. We need to status update on the projects I'm working on.
Yeah, exactly. Because otherwise you're in your silo thinking, I hope I get promoted. But like, who has ever seen it? So I think if you're an employee that wants a promotion, wants to grow, insist on those one-to-ones and like use the power that you have as like, hey, I'll leave if I don't get the support.
Sure.
Put together agendas. There's like, there's a really good template for this that I saw on TikTok that now everyone does. That includes like all of your projects, who the cross-functional partners are, the roadblocks you're facing, so that you can literally get your manager's support and buy-in on that call. It only needs to be half an hour. And then use that to your advantage. But like make sure you're being visible, because a lot of people, if in this industry, if it's, I get it can be chaos, but like if you're not getting the support from your manager, build the structure so that they can even begin to advocate for you, because otherwise they can't promote you. So,
yeah, for sure. Yeah, I try to tell people this is your time, right? When you do a one-on-one, you should own the agenda, you should prepare for it. And there's a lot of great frameworks out there. One of the ones that I like the most is when you interact with your boss or a supervisor, you should let them know what you want to get out of the communication, right? Are you just giving them an update, right? This is an FYI. Are you asking for a decision, right? Okay, here are the inputs. Here are some proposed potential solutions. What would you like us to do? Or are you asking them for feedback, right? Like, here's something that I'm working on. I'd love to get your input or take on how it's going so far. Like that's something concrete where you can make the time more productive.
I really, really like that. That's really clever. Yeah, that's the thing. I think it's being intentional at the core of everything. That will make a huge difference to your career. The other thing I'd love to say for people who want to get promoted, like we try and have a real feedback culture at DV, at Digital Voices, where it's like, if you see something that you think is incongruent with the values that we've told you during the onboarding, say it. If you see something that you think means we could be more efficient, say it. If you see a tool we could use that will save hours of your time that you're doing, like for a task you're doing multiple times, like say it. And I think a lot of people think that doing well in a company is staying under the parapet, like making sure that you don't rock the boat too much. But to me, any employee who cares enough to give that feedback is someone you want to keep in the organization. So yeah, we really, really encourage that. And Netflix has this thing. Okay, so I'm actually, this is really weird. I'm going to an event that Reed Hastings will be at in a couple of weeks. And I love the Netflix No Rules book. It's all about how policies can stifle innovative thinking in an organization. But Netflix has a thing called the Keeper Test. And we've tried to input that in DV as well. So at any time, the Keeper Test is at any time you can turn to your manager and say, hey, if I were going to leave tomorrow, would you fight to keep me? For a lot of companies, the answer is like, not really.
Yeah.
For a lot of employees, yeah. So it's a really scary thing to ask that question. But if not, why not? Like, what am I not doing? But there are people who, if they ask that question, I would be like 100%, I would do anything.
Yeah.
I think it's really healthy to come from a place in your head where you're comfortable and growth-minded enough that you can ask that question. So.
Yeah, I like that. How about side hustles? What's your take on this in an era in which everyone's a multi-hyphenate or has some project or thing that they're passionate of working on outside of work?
Yeah. As long as it doesn't interfere with work, it's normally fine. So as long as it's not like working with a client where so say you want to say you're in influence marketing, someone approached you to say, hey, could you run an influence campaign for us? Digital Voices pays for the tools, pays for Brandwatch. We pay for the processes. We pay for contracts. There is way too much overlap because you would have to use our resources. So that, no. But if it's like being on the board of something, being a creator on the side, we really encourage actually. Because like, again, if you live or die or make money by the algorithm, you will be a better employee in the influence marketing
Yep.
industry.
You learn a lot more by doing it firsthand. Yep.
Yeah. So I would say side hustles, or if it's consulting on something that's not relevant, or for a startup that could never afford us as an agency, like great. Try to balance so it doesn't interfere with your work, and try and actually be very restrictive on time. But I kind of encourage it. Like, I quite like that people have identities beyond a company, and I love when people go and network and meet people. I'm like, that just shows me that you really, really care about the work you do. So I think it's a very positive thing.
That's great. Jenny, you mentioned how important learning and development is for your career. How do you stay up to date on new trends and things going on in our industry? What are the resources or tools you use?
It's really hard, actually. It's like you can follow things like The Information, and I'm like a LinkedIn fan.
Yeah, you and me both. So
yeah. Yeah. One of my employees yesterday was saying how she doesn't have LinkedIn. She was like, is it a requirement? And I was like, no, not at all, but it's just where I find the most information.
Same.
So there are some really good podcasts, like Scott Guthrie's podcast. It's really good. To me, my learning is more related to my job. Like influence marketing, I go to conferences, I stay updated on all the time. We run the campaigns. Sure. The thing I find really hard with the learning is making sure that my skills are being honed. So I entered and won a talent award recently with an organization called WACL, which is all about women in advertising communications leadership. And they give you a fund, like a stipend, to do a course. And the course I want to do is on strategic communication, strategic leadership, because as the company gets bigger, I need to be able to communicate a vision more strongly to help people pivot. That's where, I've had coaches and it's been really helpful, but like I need to really think about how my development and how my learning can help everyone else in the company do better. I want to get out of the way. So I would say, like, yes, keep up to date with influencer marketing news, like read The Information, great. However, like Kaya is amazing, Kaya Uref.
Yeah, she's terrific. Yeah.
She's great. But also think about like, what skills do you want to learn? Because you might not be in this industry forever. Like you can move anywhere. I literally went from academia and Middle Eastern studies and refugee work to being an entrepreneur to working in a tech company. Like the skills that are going to go with you are your personal skills, not necessarily ones tied to an industry. So I would say, like, if you want to learn SQL, do it. If you want to learn strategic comms, do it. If you want to learn management, do it. If you want to learn negotiation, all those skills will go with you everywhere. So if I were advising people to take time to focus on their development, I would actually say focus on those transferable skills more than just the industry.
Makes sense. Jenny, any other advice for job seekers in the creator economy or young professionals who are still, building their career?
Yeah. Reach out directly to people on LinkedIn. I actually always find that really so someone yesterday applied for a job with us and she was straight out of college and she reached out to me on LinkedIn and was like, who should I speak with? Don't ask for my time. Don't necessarily go in straight to the CEO and be like, can I have 30 minutes for coffee? Don't do that. Be like, hey, I'm looking at applying for this role. I think it suits my skill set because I have done X in the past. Even if that's like at college, I led a project for a charity. Like when I worked at YouTube, they asked if I'd run any marketing campaigns. And I was like, I volunteered for a dog fostering charity and I ran some Facebook ads for them.
Yeah.
You're like, cool. That's what you want to see. You actually want to see if someone's a self-starter, not like, I don't need you to have run the Skims strategy. I don't need you to have worked with Rihanna at Fenty. I need you to care about what you're doing. And I need you to show me how those skills transfer.
Yeah.
So a little project, but reach out and then be like, who is best to speak to on the team about this role? And that goes a long way. You miss 100% of the shots you don't take. So,
yep, love that.
Yeah.
Very good. Yeah. Jenny, where can people find out more about you and more about Digital Voices?
So I think probably following me on LinkedIn is probably the best. I do some TikTok content about how to be an entrepreneur or influence marketing, but
nice. That's awesome.
I'm just trying it for fun. I just think TikTok's fun, but like LinkedIn's where you can really find me. So Jennifer Quigley-Jones. And Digital Voices, we're on LinkedIn as well. And Instagram is probably the best for Digital Voices. But yeah, would love to chat with anyone.
Amazing. Well, this has been terrific. Thank you so much for spending some time with us and sharing your insights. Great to hear more about your entrepreneurial journey and some awesome tips for those who are thinking about maybe just starting out or also getting inspired to launch something new.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, you've done the entrepreneur journey as well, and I think like even if there isn't a model, you learn so much from doing it. All you're giving is your time. And if you're willing to invest like your time and a lot of your personal life, like I
For
basically
sure.
just work and work out, but and see friends.
Yeah.
That's probably my life. But if you're willing to do that, I think it's the best learning experience you can ever do. And you will go to unexpected places. You will meet amazing people. I also don't think that's for everyone. So you don't need to start a job. You can start a company. You can have such a fulfilling job in influence marketing. Just choose what you care about and choose the environment that you want to be a part of really carefully. Because work's where you spend like 60% of your life.
Yeah. So hopefully you enjoy it, right? Because why not be invested in it? So much better. And I think you're right. Entrepreneurship, you do learn all of these hard skills, soft skills, but the most valuable thing I took away from it is you learn so much about yourself, right? That it's really, and that's what, I mean, just getting older is all about getting to know and love the person that you are. And entrepreneurship really hones that, right? Because you're on your own. So you have to succeed or fail, for better or for worse, with you and those around you. And that's a really powerful experience. So,
I love that. Yeah. Did you find at the end, I mean, you just are kind of a different person because you've had to like hone, like if you're too reactive, you've had to learn to edit that. If you make decisions in stress or scarcity, you have to edit that because otherwise you won't succeed. Did you find like you'd changed as a person and you got to know the new person at the end of the trip?
a little bit, right? I think like with anything, it hones or enhances some of who you already are. Like some of it's just innate. But there's a lot of things I learned, right? I worked in early stage startups and you learn a lot about what works, but you also learn what not to do. And there were critical moments in my career where there were people that I saw who were very successful, but maybe didn't share the values or the type of qualities that I wanted outside of work, right? Trying to like develop the whole person. And so, yeah, absolutely. Like you evolve and you kind of identify who am I and who do I want to be. And that version of you kind of gradually emerges as you go through this process.
Yeah, I love that. Like so many entrepreneurs are so ego driven and sometimes you meet them and you're like, that's not why I'm doing this. Like, that's not what inspires me.
Yep.
And so I think then you kind of work out, you're right, what your values are and who you really want to be. Yeah, it's a really interesting journey. I wouldn't say all entrepreneurs are the same, but like if you want to come at it from a place of ego, it's just not my style, or yours either. So.
Yeah, no, definitely, right. And it's easy to spot those who take that approach from a mile away. But yes, to each their own. So, Jenny, thank you again. This has been awesome. Great to chat with you. Amazing to hear more about you and your story. So, thanks for joining us on the podcast.
Really appreciate it. Thank you. Bye.